Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news, so if you haven't had time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. Stay tuned for our weekly review where we'll give you the scoop on the biggest stories that you may have missed in the last 7 days, right from Tel Aviv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us. The Israeli Defense Forces targeted 8 Hamas terror positions in the Gaza Strip Wednesday night in response to yet another rocket attack on the Eshkol and Mechavim regions of southern Israel.
Thankfully, there were no casualties or injured, but the attack comes just a week after 2 rockets were allegedly fired into Israel accidentally from the Strip, one of which hit a Beersheva home when the Iron Dome failed to respond correctly. Last night, the Iron Dome batteries did fire, however, after sirens alerted to the attack around 11:17 p.m. The Iron Dome interceptor missile was redirected, though, after it was calculated that the Gaza rocket was to fall in an open field. Brigadier General Manelis from the spokesperson's unit in the IDF said that the Iron Dome wasn't meant to intercept rockets that don't pose immediate danger to human life or property. In fact, he explained that a successful interception can even be more dangerous if it means debris will fall down and scatter above populated areas. Meanwhile, in the ensuing Israeli Air Force response attack, Israeli jets hit 3 Hamas military compounds, a training camp, weapons storage and manufacturing buildings, and more. No terror group in the Strip has yet claimed responsibility for last night's attack, but according to the IDF spokesperson's unit, quote, the Hamas terrorist organization is responsible for everything happening in and out of the Gaza Strip, and it will bear the consequences of the terrorist acts carried out against the citizens of Israel, end quote.
Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman made a vast shift in his policy towards Gaza over the last few days, from Monday, where he stated that Israel's only option was war with Hamas, to last night, where Lieberman declared the resumption of sending Qatari-funded fuel into the Strip.
In large part, the change in tone comes following reports that last week's rocket attack from Gaza, which hit an Israeli Beersheva home, was indeed an accident. As for the deal with Qatar, that was initially brokered by the United Nations and supported by the U.S. However, it only lasted for just 3 days as a result of actual intensified Palestinian violence. The suspension was 12 days ago, but the Defense Ministry is now stating that due to a decrease in violent events in Gaza, as well as Hamas's efforts to restrain the weekly border protests, they've decided to reopen the pedestrian crossings into Israel, as well as allow the fuel and aid shipments. Meanwhile, however, Prime Minister Netanyahu is still maintaining a more cautious stance, stating that Hamas has essentially taken control of over 2 million people who are all committed to the destruction of Israel and are not partners in diplomacy. He added that Israel will not allow them to proceed or carry out their plans, stating, quote, the first thing I'm committed to is security. No rockets, no mortars, and no balloons, end quote. But with fuel shipments and crossings now returning to normal, only time will tell if the violence on the border will continue to decline as it has since the weekend, or if Israel must come up with a new strategy moving forward.
It seems that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror organizations in Gaza were actually telling the truth when they claimed innocence over last week's missile attack that destroyed a Beersheva home. According to Yediot Achronot News, Israeli cabinet officials definitely believe now that the rocket fire was accidentally caused by a freak lightning strike. The lightning hypothesis first came to light last Thursday, the day after the attack, and states that Hamas likely already aimed and armed the missiles in preparation for the eventuality of violence with Israel. But the lightning in the area is supposedly what shorted out the pad and launched the projectiles. The 2 Grad rockets launched from the Strip just after 3:30 in the morning, with one landing offshore near central Israel and the other on a home in Beersheva. According to independent investigations by the Weather It Is company and the Israel Total Lightning Network, 5 bolts of lightning indeed struck the Gaza coast in that same time period. The 2 organizations track lightning strikes and confirm that while 4 of the 5 hit the Mediterranean Sea, 1 did strike inland. Further, rocketry expert Tal Inbar from the Fisher Institute for Air and Space Strategic Studies told the Times of Israel last week that due to Hamas' poor infrastructure, a short circuit could have actually caused the launch. And these new reports couldn't have come at a better time. Defense Minister Lieberman just this morning was quoted saying that Israel has exhausted all options with Hamas except for war. And at the very least, many others in the security cabinet have been eyeing heavy strikes as punishment for the apparent attack. In fact, in the hours following the strike, Israeli jets hit 20 Hamas military and infrastructure targets within the Strip, including a terror tunnel stretching all the way into Israel. But the terror groups in Gaza immediately condemned the rocket fire, saying it would be irresponsible to subvert the ongoing Egyptian-led peace negotiations. Additionally, cell phone footage uploaded to social media showed the exact moment that the lightning strike caused the launch. And that brings us to today, where Justice Minister ILTV told Israel Radio that she could not confirm the exact cause of the missile strike. But that, based on what we know, Hamas did not mean to shoot the rockets. So with that in mind, it finally looks as though the likelihood of war has been reduced, because as one minister was quoted saying, it would not be right to go to war over the weather.
Israel today is reopening the Gaza crossing checkpoints thanks to what the Defense Ministry has called a relative calm. This, however, despite a weekend still practically full of terrorist activity.
IDF forces first ramped up their activity along the Gaza border in a show of force Thursday afternoon, just a day after a rocket from Gaza landed on a Beersheba home. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror organization still deny any involvement in the attack, though, and blame outside forces for attempting to sabotage Egyptian and UN-led negotiations with Israel via the attack. The weekly Hamas-organized riots along the Gaza-Israel border on Friday were also relatively small, with protesters numbering just around 10,000. A third of several previous weekends. Still, those who did arrive set fire to tires and threw them over the fence. They also again threw grenades and explosives at the Israeli forces across the border and at the security barrier itself. 130 Palestinians were reportedly shot and wounded by IDF forces in efforts to push them back. Saturday morning, fires sparked by incendiary balloons broke out along the Israel-Gaza border region near Kisufim, Be'eri, and Shekoda forests. No injuries were reported, and IAF jets later attacked a terror cell in the southern Gaza Strip that was launching the incendiary balloons. But a few Palestinians Saturday morning managed to break into Israel and film their seemingly easy trip. They even hung a photo of a supposed Palestinian martyr on an abandoned sniper post. Later, Israeli police arrested a 20-year-old Palestinian man in the settlement of Har Adar outside Jerusalem. He was armed with a knife, and investigations established that the suspect first breached the separation barrier and then walked through a forest to get to the settlement, intent on carrying out a terror attack. Thankfully, the suspect only walked about 30 meters into the settlement before being noticed by a security guard who alerted authorities.
Israeli security forces are accusing Hezbollah, the Lebanese terror organization, of violating the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which establishes a demilitarized zone between Israel and Lebanon and describes the terms of a ceasefire agreement. According to a statement by the IDF, the Iranian terror proxy has established an observation post just 1 kilometer from the border near the village of Al-Adisa.
In addition, the IDF charges that the outpost is run under the banner of the fake environmental NGO Green Without Borders. The Army spokesperson's unit stated that, quote, Hezbollah acts as if the IDF is not aware of its activities, but the IDF regularly monitors the activities of Hezbollah and, as it has shown recently, is aware of this and other activities. Both Israel and Hezbollah often accuse one another of violating the terms of the ceasefire agreement. This latest revelation also comes just days after an Iranian cargo jet was discovered to have allegedly transported advanced weapon systems to Hezbollah, including GPS for precision missiles. International authorities were alerted to the delivery after an Iranian 747 cargo jet made an unusual stop in Beirut outside its normal shipment route to Damascus. This information was reportedly confirmed by multiple Western forces, including the U.S., and falls directly in line with what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said in his speech to the United Nations General Assembly. At the time, he repeated that, quote, Iran is directing missiles that can target deep inside Israel within an accuracy of 10 meters. But despite Israel's warnings, UNIFIL troops have been blocked from inspecting the site, again in violation of the UN resolution. Israel will likely act independently then in the near future.
Meanwhile, back in Ramallah, Palestinian Authority President Abbas has just announced that the PLO may decide to abrogate many of its agreements with Israel and the United States, pending discussions at the upcoming PLO Central Council meeting later this month.
Speaking to Palestine TV, Abbas said that the PLO plans to put all the agreements between the two nations on the table and review them, continuing that they intend to ask Israel to stop violating said agreements, and that, quote, perhaps we will arrive at the point of abrogating a lot of what is between us, end quote. Such threats aren't necessarily new coming from Abbas, and nothing has really ever come of them before, but this time the threat was announced following nearly a year of increased tensions with Israel, the United States, and Hamas, as well as internal pressures to both save face and consolidate power and control over the Palestinian territories. Hamas-Fatah unity agreements, for example, have grinded to a halt, and the United States has made multiple moves that appear to reflect heavily downgraded relations between Washington and Ramallah. But until the PLO Council meets next week on October the 28th and 29th, it's impossible to know just how serious Abbas's rhetoric really is.
Israel's now reportedly attempting to negotiate with Jordan regarding the annexation of 2 areas on the Israeli-Jordanian border. Last night, responding to such reports, Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi said that no such negotiation request has yet been submitted, and even if it had, it would be rejected.
Safadi said, quote, "We will not negotiate over the sovereignty of these areas," echoing King Abdullah's comments from just a few days ago when he made the announcement. Safadi continued by saying that, quote, "If we do open talks, the only question will be how we cancel these leased areas." The 2 areas, Naharaim and Sofar, are primarily agricultural, and Israeli farmers have worked on the land for the past 25 years as part of the 1994 Israel-Jordan peace agreement. Israelis in the area are against the annexation and are in contact with the government regarding the move.
קודם כל אני חושב שזאת תהיה טעות, אני חושב שצריך לשקול את זה היטב. ומבחינתנו כמובן כמגדלי חקלאות באזורים האלה ובפרט כאן באי השלום, אנחנו ניפגע מהמהלך הזה. יש לנו שנה ללמוד וגם לירדנים ללמוד את הנושא הזה. מקווה שנגיע לאיזושהי מתווה שיאפשר לנו להמשיך לגדל חקלאות.
It's suspected that due to the heavy pressure from Jordanian lawmakers, anything short of a complete Israeli withdrawal is unlikely.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority is now again denouncing the United States after Secretary of State Pompeo's announcement last week. Pompeo reported Washington's intent to merge its main diplomatic mission in East Jerusalem for the Palestinians with its new embassy complex in Jerusalem.
Pompeo reiterated that the United States continues to take no position on final status issues, though, including boundaries or borders, leaving such decisions up to the result of direct negotiations. That, and that the move is meant to, quote, achieve significant efficiencies and increase our effectiveness, end quote. But the Palestinian Authority sees this as yet another downgrading in relations and a major blow to the United States' position as a partner and intermediary in peace.
The American State Department's decision to merge the consulate with the so-called embassy is a further step in trying to dictate the results of negotiations and to move from negotiations to dictations. It's part of the so-called deal of the century, meaning they want to take off Jerusalem off the table, refugees and settlements off the table. And it's being dictated by a group of extremist ideologues in the U.S. administration.
In addition to this move, Trump's administration has also recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moved the United States Embassy to Jerusalem shortly thereafter, cut funding to Palestinian aid organizations, and closed the PLO offices in Washington. All moves that the Palestinians have publicly stated they feel were hostile. Pompeo insists, however, that the United States will, quote, continue to conduct a full range of reporting, outreach, and programming in the West Bank and Gaza, as well as with Palestinians in Jerusalem through a new Palestinian Affairs unit inside the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, end quote. Israel's Channel 2 News also even reported that President Trump sent World Jewish Congress President Ron Lauder as a personal envoy to President Abbas last week. Time will tell how the Palestinians will respond if and when the move comes to fruition.
All right, in related news, the much-anticipated ruling on the illegally built Bedouin village Khan al-Amar has come down, and the Israeli High Court of Justice has surprised us all. It ruled that there was no legal reason not to continue with the demolition of the village, but that demolition should be postponed indefinitely anyway, in preference of a negotiated settlement.
Initially, it was reported that Prime Minister Netanyahu had decided Saturday to postpone the demolition in response to the court ruling. But in a press conference today with United States Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in Jerusalem, Netanyahu said no such thing. During their meeting, the two officials discussed regional stability, Iran, and more. But afterwards, in response to a reporter's question on the Bedouin village, the premier reiterated his support for the legal system's authority while rejecting the possibility that the village demolition will be deferred forever.
ח'אן אל-אחמר יפונה. זו החלטה של בית משפט, זו המדיניות שלנו והיא גם תתבצע. אין לי כוונה לדחות את זה עד להודעה חדשה בניגוד לפרסומים, אלא למועד קצוב וקצר, ומשך הזמן שניתן לנסות לפנות את זה בהסכמה ייקבע על ידי הקבינט. אני אכנס אותו היום ונקבע, זה יהיה קצר, ואני מאמין שזה גם יהיה בהסכמה.
No new date has yet been given for the demolition, though, leading Palestinian activists and officials, as well as some human rights groups, to cheer the ruling as a step in the right direction. But protesters seem to know that the fight is far from over, leading many to state intentions to continue protests and demonstrations until the demolition is cancelled outright. Khan al-Ahmar was ordered to be destroyed back in May last year, as the village was established illegally without building permits. It also supposedly sits too closely to the highway, making it arguably a dangerous place to live. Israeli officials argue that the Bedouins didn't follow proper channels to get building permits, and that anyway, the government intends to simply relocate the roughly 200 Bedouin villagers towards the nearby settlement of Abu Dis. But Palestinians have argued that Israel intentionally makes it difficult for Palestinians, Arabs, and Bedouins to get building permits, forcing people to resort to building illegally. And that despite the new intended site having hookups to water, electricity, sewage, and a new school building, Palestinians from Abu Dis nearby have warned not to take the deal. The planned site reportedly was chosen without consulting the villagers, doesn't suit a rural Bedouin lifestyle, and is apparently just next to a garbage dump. Still, if Netanyahu and other coalition heads follow through with their statements, it's only a matter of time before the village of Khan al-Ahmar is destroyed, one way or another.
The Knesset has just passed a long-debated new film law which dictates the structure of how Israeli films will be financed, with 44 votes in favor and 32 votes against. ILTV's Yael Shir has a report.
Thanks, Aaron. Culture and Sports Minister Miri Regev has promised that the film industry will no longer be an elite or closed group anymore. In the new law, scripts that will receive funding will no longer be selected by the film funds, but rather the script readers will nominate films, and then the Ministry of Culture will decide which films will merit funding.
So how does this change the landscape of the film industry then?
So previously, the films that received funding reflected a very narrow range of society. Regev said that this new law will encourage the making of films by Jewish, Arab, Zionist, and Haredi filmmakers. Previously, only 1% of government funds went to Arab and Haredi films. Now they're actually allocating 7% of funds for Arab culture in Israel, which is a dramatic increase. The Culture Office will also decide the amount of funding that films will receive, and this will be raised to 15 to 20% of the total production budget. The annual state budget to support the industry will be increased by 20 million shekels per year. So it's really a positive change.
Well, yeah, that's a huge increase. But who opposes the law, and what are the suspected drawbacks? Because I can imagine how this policy might limit Israel's creativity in film potentially. For example, just how last month Culture Minister Regev called for funding for the Haifa Film Fest to be re-examined for so-called subversive films. But what's subversive is very subjective.
Well, actually, the truth is many of these subversive films are blatantly anti-Israel and pro-BDS. So, they could cause unnecessary incitement and violence. And I think the goal is to limit the government funds of films that could potentially harm the state of Israel. There were some people who opposed the bill. Israeli Parliament member Yossi Yona from the Zionist Union said that although he encourages any initiative by the parliament to advance multicultural beliefs, he also believes that Regev lacks the knowledge to fill the role. He said that she should be pushing the freedom of expression rather than censoring those with whom she doesn't agree.
I mean, there maybe is something to that. We're not sure. Again, it probably depends on the film. But, what did some of the supporters have to say in response then? Yeah,
many political activists have said that the new law will promote films from more diverse backgrounds, which will be definitely a positive and a better representation of Israeli society. They also argue that the government funds should be representative of all sectors, not just the left-leaning cultural elite.
All right, and what about films that are in fact found to be subversive?
Well, these activists believe that criticizing the government is different from trying to harm the state, such as how those who support the BDS movement are very active in trying to harm Israel. So the new bill will prevent pro-BDS filmmakers from receiving funding and then turning around to use that money to make films that attempt to harm Israel. But generally, films from a more diverse background will hopefully get the support they need to finance their creative endeavors.
All right, well, of course, come back with the updates when the next big film starts production. Until then, thanks for your report, Yad.
Thanks, Aaron.
And now we turn to ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh for this week's Top 5.
With Gal Gadot being the most popular Israeli on Instagram with over 21 million followers, there are many more Israelis whose perfectly filtered and curated feeds are gaining crazy attention here in Israel and abroad. So I'm here to give you guys ILTV's Top 5 list of rising Israeli Instagram stars you should definitely follow. First up is the young, the beautiful, and extremely talented Anna Zak. This 17-year-old is one of Israel's biggest social media stars. She models and sings and started her career back in 2014 on the Israeli kids reality show, The Boys and Girls. Since then, Anna has racked up more than 1.1 million followers on Instagram, along with her first single, Money Honey. And it doesn't end there. Zak actually was ranked the #1 most influential Israeli on Instagram last year, ahead of supermodel Bar Rafaeli. I'd follow her if I were you. Second up is Talia Sutra. After living in New York for the past 17 years, Talia made her way back to Tel Aviv after traveling the world, hosting yoga workshops and trainings. Her feed is filled with impressive yoga poses I wouldn't dare try myself, inspiring mantras, and stunning views of Israel. If you're looking for the best yoga teacher in the city, definitely check out Talia's page. Third on the list is the stunning and beyond talented Dana Zalmon. This fashion-forward entrepreneur has done it all. She started a blog about fashion and lifestyle back in 2014. She landed a role on the Israeli reality series It Girls that she helped create, and now started her own Instagram academy to help others create unique and timeless feeds just like her own. I've been following her for a while. Are you? Fourth up is the young Israeli model Barak Shamir. While he's just 19 years old, Shamir is not shy about sharing his life on Instagram. Known for his mop of curly hair and then shaving it publicly before enlisting in the IDF, Barak has modeled for some of the top designers, including international brands like Versace, Nike, D2, and so many more. He's single right now, ladies. You better go follow. Last but of course never least on the list, Lital Rosenstein. This quirky Instagram has been the talk of the town for months now. Lital's feed is filled with food photos featuring fruits and veggies, with goofy googly eyes, candy-piled slices of toast, and more creative mouth-watering pics. When Instagram turned to Lital back in 2016 to design a creative photo for Rosh Hashanah, her googly-eyed pomegranate shot got almost 1 million likes. If you're a foodie, go follow. That's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
All right, that's it for this week's weekly review. Remember to follow us on Facebook for more news at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.